Do different types nutrition determine abdominal fat, or it is just extra calories stored as fat? Why someone fat stored in abdomen and others stored in different parts of body? Is it different types of food? It depends on other factors. Mainly genetics and hormones dictate how your body distributes body fat, and calorie intake dictates how much body fat you carry. Mainly genetics and hormones dictate how your body distributes body fat. To this point, the foods you eat can affect hormones. I've noticed that the speed at which the fat has gained seems to have an impact on where fat is stored. This is completely anecdotal and a pet theory of mine, so take it for what you will. I struggled with eating disorders for a few years, and when I'd binge it definitely seemed like more fat was going directly to my stomach rather than an even spread. I've noticed the same in others. To me it seems like acute overeating creates more abdominal fat than a 50-100 calorie surplus over a long period of time. But again, just a theory. Happy to hear arguments. I have a bachelor's in nutrition I got about 10 years ago, and remember toward the end we had a unit that touched on this that I always wished we went more into depth on. We began talking about the possibility of different areas of fat in the body being distinguished as different organs because the types of hormones released by separate areas are so different and a big part of the endocrine system. The hormones released by these areas partially dictate hunger and where fat is stored. I know leptin is one hormone in particular that changes depending on the area of fat. It's primarily based on genetics. Your gender and hormone levels also determine whether you will have a more pear-apple type of body. Overall, where the fat goes is based on your genes and hormones. But depending on your diet you may or may not ever notice it. I would also like to remind that spot reduction is not a thing, and a healthy diet and good physical activity will have good results. While spot reduction is not possible, the amount of muscle you have can make it appear you have less fat than you actually do in a certain area. Not a nutritionist, but it is mostly excess calories. There are some people who are more genetically predisposed to having high cholesterol even on a healthy diet, like my cousin. Her mother is thin with super high cholesterol and my cousin is overweight with super high cholesterol, but the stomach fat is mostly storing the excess calories. Body shape is shaped by genetics. I did have a friend who was a very strong pear shape, super wide hips, and she was a lacto-ovo vegetarian. She wanted to lose weight and the nutritionist encouraged her to throw more protein in her diet. Make sure she had protein with her snacks, plant-based or egg. She felt it helped her lose some of her hip fat. The deep abdominal fat is definitely too much sugar and calories. When she increased her protein intake, did that by any chance make her feel more filled, satisfied, in turn making her reduce overall calorie intake? I would imagine it's a lot to do with genetics, but also stress. When you're stressed you tend to gain more fat in your midsection. The big difference food make in fat placement is mainly visceral or subcutaneous fat. The former is mostly formed by fructose and industrial oils. The latter is mostly due to excess carbohydrates that prevent fat mobilization and hunger regulation. Mind that evolutionarily subcutaneous fat is an advantage. With omnipresent carbohydrates all year long it became a problem. For years, I believed in the eat less move more advice. And it worked for me. As an athlete I weighed about 10 pounds more than I did in high school, and if I need to lose weight I just snacked less. Then I got to my 50s and that stopped working. My weight kept creeping up despite eating a healthy athlete low fat diet and riding 100+ miles a week. And I started having energy issues. After flipping my diet, I now weigh pretty much what I weighed in high school despite carrying a bit more muscle. So yes, it's extra calories. But eat less move more is a failure for most people who want to lose weight because they are insulin resistant, and that means it's not a winning strategy. Then I got to my 50s. Metabolism also slows by about 10% every decade you get older, starting in your 30s. So you have to work out 10% more in your 30s, another 10% harder in your 40s, another 10% harder in your 50s. You gotta keep ramping it up and harder. I'm currently 47-year-old male, and my rough stats at the moment are daily average of 1200 to 1400 active calories, total calories burned per day around 3500 to 4000. Daily average of around 9.6 miles walked, about 15,000 steps every day. Rain, snow, whatever. I'm on day 322 consecutive on Apple activity rings. Only 43 days left to get my 365 achievement. Daily average of 90 million exercise per day. Yesterday I totaled about 15 miles, 29,850 steps and 4673 total calories burned. And while I'm losing belly fat and shaping up nicely, it's still a constant daily battle. If I take even the slightest day off just a little bit slower than normal, I can definitely feel my progress slide backwards. I have to hit it really hard every single day. Metabolism also slows by about 10% every decade you get older, starting in your 30s. So you have to work out 10% more in your 30s, another 10% harder in your 40s, another 10% harder in your 50s. You gotta keep ramping it up and harder. This makes little sense from a physiological perspective and even less from a training perspective. Fat burning during exercise is primarily done during low intensity exercise, and the last thing most athletes need is more high intensity stress in their training. And it really doesn't align with the population. Back when I was young there were a lot of thinner elderly people, and they were neither counting calories nor exercising. By harder I mean you have to do more, not higher spikes of intensity necessarily, but longer, harder, more effective workouts, whatever that means for the person doing it. If you're walking 5 miles a day, up it to 7. If you're doing 30 million of yoga, up it to 45, etc. As people age, generally speaking, they have a tendency to get less active. I don't think anyone would disagree that we should actively fight against that and find little ways in and around our everyday tasks to be more active. Take the stairs more often. Park further away in the parking lot. Carry that heavy suitcase instead of escalatoring it, etc. etc. If people push just a little 10% more on a combination of a lot of small tasks through their day, the overall effect will be healthier living. You kind of have to take the David Goggins mentality of, when you start to feel tired, you've probably only done about 40%. I'm currently averaging 90 million of exercise per day. But there are some days when I know I won't be able to dedicate 1.5 to 2 hours walking in the evening. So I purposely get up earlier and try to get away from my desk walking back and forth between buildings to play a little game with myself to see if I can reach 50% of my goals by 12 noon. If I can, finish off the other 50% by 4 PM when I leave, so that I don't have to go walking for 2 hours in the evening. By harder I mean you have to do more. Not higher spikes of intensity necessarily, but longer, harder, more effective workouts, whatever that means for the person doing it. If you're walking 5 miles a day, up it to 7. If you're doing 30 million of yoga, up it to 45, etc. Why have to? I don't necessarily disagree that most people these days end up putting on weight as they age, but I think it's pretty clear that that's tied to increased insulin resistance as they get older. We have perfectly good weight control systems that work fine if we address the causes of insulin resistance. I exercise less than I did when I was in my early 40s, but I'm 10 plus pounds lighter than I was back then because I fixed my insulin resistance. I agree that daily activity is a good thing. Your genetics determine how your body stored fat, but extra fat is just extra fat. Nutrition only matters to the extent of the number of calories you're eating and burning. While people are correct that things like genetics do have a role in this equation, I would argue that nutrition has a larger role. Your body wants to find the easiest energy source. For the most part that is nutrition, and what you ingest, i.e. what food hits your stomach and gets converted into energy into the bloodstream, is way faster and easier than forcing your body to convert stored fat back into energy. Take 2 people, one who eats a lot of high fat fast food, etc. 2 who eats as healthy and low fat as possible, veggies, etc. Person 1 is going to have a higher fat ratio, especially if they have a very sedentary lifestyle and there's no need to burn any energy. Person 2 will get some energy from the food they eat, but if it's low fat enough, there won't be anything to store as fat. They'll be forcing their body to use existing fat stores to convert back to energy. Studies have already shown that when calories are equated, the macronutrient content of the food does not change the body fat percentage. Stress hormones. Menopause hormones can make your body store more around the middle. Do anxiety count as stress? If you enjoyed this video and want more fitness related content, click subscribe and hit the notification bell.